Alien priest said only gods raise that blade. Earthling replied this. From a yard sail bin the temple floated in silence above a dying star. Its outer rings were old, older than most empires, and every stone had been placed with care by hands long turned to dust. Light from the star spilled through wide crystal windows, painting the hall in slow shades of red and gold. To the aliens who lived here, this place was not just a building. It was the center of belief, history, and power. At the heart of the great hall stood the blade. It rested on a low platform made of black stone. No chains held it. No case protected it. It did not need them. The blade of ages had never moved without permission. It was long, smooth, and dull gray with no gems or sharp shine. Yet everyone in the hall felt its weight, even from a distance. The air around it felt heavy, as if the blade pulled on more than gravity. Tall alien priests stood in a wide circle around the platform. Their robes were white and silver, marked with old symbols that told stories of gods, trials, and chosen ones. At the front stood the high priest, his long crest rising proudly as he looked at the gathered crowd. Today was a sacred day. Nobles, scholars, and chosen guests filled the outer rows of the hall. None spoke, none moved. Even breathing felt too loud. This was the day of the calling, when the blade was shown to remind all beings of their place in the universe. Near the back of the hall stood a human. He did not wear robes. He wore a simple gray jacket and plain boots worn at the edges. His hands rested in his pockets. His name was not important here. To most in the room, he was barely noticed. He was an Earthling technician, invited only because humans were now part of the wider galaxy. His role was to observe, record, and say nothing. The high priest raised his staff, and the soft hum of the temple faded into complete silence. "Behold," the priest said, his voice echoing through the hall, "the blade of ages, forged before our kind learned to walk the stars, lifted only by gods, touched only by those chosen by fate." The priest walked slowly toward the platform. Every step was careful, respectful. He did not look at the blade directly until he stood before it. "For 10,000 cycles," he continued, "kings have knelt before it, warriors have failed it, scholars have studied it, and still it remains unmoved. It waits." The crowd bowed their heads. The human did not. He watched quietly, eyes focused on the blade, not with fear or worship, but with calm interest. His gaze followed the shape of the handle, the balance of the metal, the way it rested naturally on the stone. One of the lower priests noticed and stiffened. Such behavior was unusual, disrespectful even. The high priest spoke again. "Today we remind the galaxy of truth. Power is not taken, it is granted. The blade cannot be raised by strength, skill, or will alone. Only the divine may lift it." A murmur of agreement passed through the hall. The human shifted his weight slightly. He leaned closer to the alien guide assigned to him, a short, nervous official whose job was to ensure the human followed protocol. "Excuse me," the human whispered softly. The guide froze. "You must remain silent," he whispered back, panic in his voice. The human nodded. "Just a question." The guide hesitated, then sighed. "What is it? Has anyone ever checked if it's stuck?" the human asked. The guide stared at him in horror. "Stuck." Like, the human continued calmly, balanced, locked, magnetized, something like that. The guide's eyes widened. "It is sacred." "Right," the human said. "Still a thing, though." Before the guide could respond, the high priest's sharp eyes moved across the hall. They stopped on the human. "You," the priest said, pointing with his staff. "Earthling," the hall gasped. Every head turned. The human straightened and slowly removed his hands from his pockets. He did not bow deeply like the others. He gave a small, polite nod. "Yes," he said. "Why do you speak during the calling?" the priest demanded. "I didn't mean to interrupt," the human replied. His voice was calm, respectful, and clear. "I was just curious." "Curious about what?" the priest asked coldly. The human looked at the blade again. "About that." The crowd stirred. Some nobles leaned forward, others hissed softly in offense. The high priest's crest flared. "That blade is beyond your kind's understanding." "Maybe," the human said, "but it looks familiar." The priest laughed, a sharp sound filled with pride. "Only gods raise that blade." The human tilted his head slightly. "Oh," that single word echoed more than any shout. "Oh," the priest repeated. "Yeah," the human said, "I've seen tools like that before." The guide beside him looked like he might faint. "Tools," the priest said, insult clear in his voice. "You dare call a divine relic a tool?" The human shrugged lightly. I mean, that's what it looks like. Balanced grip, reinforced spine, not decorative, made to be used. The priest raised his staff high. This is blasphemy. I'm not trying to offend, the human replied, just being honest. The high priest studied him closely. You believe you understand what countless civilizations have failed to comprehend? No, the human said. I think they might be overthinking it. A wave of shocked sounds rippled through the hall. The priest stepped aside, gesturing toward the blade. Then step forward, Earthling, touch it. The guide grabbed the human's sleeve. Do not, he whispered urgently. This is how disgrace begins. The human gently pulled his arm free. It's okay. He walked forward. Each step echoed loudly in the silent hall. Alien eyes followed him, some filled with anger, others with fear, and a few with sharp curiosity. No human had ever been allowed this close before. The human stopped a short distance from the platform. The blade did not glow. The air did not shake. Nothing dramatic happened. The high priest smiled. Kneel, he commanded, and learn humility. The human did not kneel. He crouched instead, leaning closer to the platform. He examined the blade from the side, his eyes narrowing slightly in thought. He noticed small marks along the handle, worn smooth by countless failed attempts. He noticed how the blade rested in a shallow groove, not locked, not sealed. Interesting, he murmured. What are you doing? The priest demanded. Looking, the human replied, just looking. He stood up and placed one hand on the handle. The crowd gasped. Nothing happened. The blade did not resist. It did not burn. It did not push back. The human frowned slightly, adjusted his grip, and shifted his stance. The high priest raised his staff, ready to shout to stop this madness. But before he could speak, the human lifted the blade. Not with effort, not with struggle. He lifted it like someone picking up an old tool they recognized. The blade rose smoothly from the stone. Silence crushed the hall. No light burst forth. No thunder roared. There was only the quiet sound of metal leaving stone and the steady breathing of a human holding something that gods were supposed to touch. The human looked at the blade, surprised only a little. Huh, he said softly. Every belief in the room cracked just a little. And part one ended there, with the blade held in human hands and an entire galaxy about to question everything it thought it knew. The silence did not break right away. The human stood with the blade in his hands, holding it at a comfortable angle, as if he had done this many times before. His arms did not shake. His face showed no pride, no fear, no sign of power. He only looked thoughtful, like someone checking the weight of a hammer before using it. The high priest felt his breath catch. His staff slipped slightly in his grip. For a long moment he could not speak. The nobles whispered among themselves. Some backed away as if the human had become dangerous. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, trying to see if some hidden light or sign would appear. Nothing did. The blade stayed dull gray. The air stayed still. This is impossible, a priest whispered. Another priest fell to his knees, pressing his forehead to the floor. A god walks among us, he said, his voice shaking. The human looked up, confused. No, he said quickly, please don't do that. The words echoed through the hall, soft but clear. The high priest finally found his voice. Put it down, he said sharply. Now. The human hesitated, then carefully lowered the blade back onto the platform. He made sure it rested exactly as before. When his hand left the handle, the blade did not move. He stepped back, raising both hands slightly. See, nothing special. That made things worse. The priest stared at the blade, then at the human, then at the blade again. Their world no longer fit together the way it had moments ago. You lifted it, the high priest said. Without prayer, without ritual. Yeah, the human said, I just picked it up. Only gods may do that, the priest replied, his voice weaker now. The human shook his head. Then maybe the rule is wrong. A sharp intake of breath spread through the hall. The high priest straightened. You insult our faith. I don't mean to, the human said. I really don't, but I think something got misunderstood a long time ago. One of the scholars stepped forward, her eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. Explain, she said. The priest turned on her. This is not. Let him speak, the scholar said. We all saw what happened. The high priest hesitated. The room waited. Fine, he said at last. Speak, Earthling, but choose your words carefully. The human nodded. Okay. He looked around the hall at the symbols carved into the walls, at the long history built around the blade. Back on Earth, he began, we find old things all the time. Tools, machines, stuff people used before we were born. Sometimes we forget what they were for. Sometimes we make stories because we don't know the answer. The high priest frowned. You compare our sacred history to ignorance? I compare it to memory loss, the human replied gently. Big difference. The scholar leaned closer. Go on. The human pointed toward the blade. That thing wasn't made to test worth. It was made to be used. See the grip. It's shaped for hands like mine, not yours. Several priests hissed at that. But that doesn't mean it's divine, the human added. It means it was made by someone who thought like a human. The hall stirred. Impossible, the high priest said. The makers were gods. Maybe, the human said, or maybe they were just people trying to survive. A low, uneasy silence followed. The scholar spoke again. You lifted it easily. Why? The human thought for a moment. Balance, he said, and expectation. Expectation? The scholar asked. Yeah, he said. Everyone here believes it can't be lifted, so they pull wrong, they fight it, they tense up. I didn't. He demonstrated by placing his hands in the air, mimicking the motion. I just matched its center and lifted straight up. The scholar's eyes widened. So, no divine force? No, the human said, just physics. That word meant little to most in the room, but the meaning was clear enough. The high priest stepped forward again. Then explain this, he said. Why has no one else ever lifted it? The human looked at the priests, then at the nobles, then back at the blade. Because no one was allowed to treat it like a thing, he said. You turned it into a symbol. That struck deep. Symbols were power. Symbols were control. The guide who had brought the human cleared his throat nervously. If I may, he said softly. Everyone turned. The Earthling was invited as an observer, the guide continued. We did not expect this. The high priest's crest lowered slightly. What do humans believe this blade is worth? The human blinked. Worth? Yes, the priest said. Power, authority, status. The human scratched the back of his neck. Honestly, not much. Maybe a museum piece or scrap depending on the metal, the nobles gasped. The scholar laughed once, sharp and surprised. Scrap. Well, the human said, if it's not useful anymore. The high priest stared at him, trying to understand a mind so different from his own. Then why did you look at it with interest? The human smiled faintly. Because broken things tell stories. That answer hung in the air. The scholar nodded slowly. You are not a god, she said. No, the human agreed. You are not chosen by fate. Definitely not. She tilted her head. Then what are you? The human thought about Earth. About crowded streets, old homes, forgotten tools, and weekend yard sales where people sold pieces of their past for a few coins. I'm someone who fixes things, he said. The high priest felt a strange fear rise in his chest. Not fear of power, fear of truth. The blade had not been waiting for gods. It had been waiting for someone who understood it, and that thought was far more dangerous than any prophecy. As the temple lights dimmed slightly and the dying star outside continued its slow collapse, the high priest realized something terrible. If this human was right, then their faith was not built on divine will. It was built on a mistake, and mistakes could be corrected. Part 2 ended with the priest staring at the blade, no longer sure whether it was sacred or simply forgotten. The high priest dismissed the crowd before panic could grow into chaos. Nobles were guided out in stiff silence, their eyes still fixed on the platform as if the blade might move on its own. Scholars whispered to each other, already forming theories they were afraid to say out loud. The priests remained, standing in a wide circle, unsure where faith ended and fear began. The human was asked to wait. He stood near the side of the hall, hands relaxed at his sides, watching the lights along the ceiling pulse slowly. He did not look proud. He did not look worried. He looked patient, like someone waiting for a decision that did not fully belong to him. The blade rested where he had placed it. It looked the same as it always had. The high priest turned to the council of elders, his voice low. This cannot be allowed to spread, one elder nodded. If word reaches the outer systems, belief will fracture. Another elder added, without belief, the priesthood loses its purpose. The scholar who had spoken earlier folded her arms. Or we gain the truth. Several elders hissed softly. This truth, the high priest said, undermines 10,000 cycles of order. Order built on misunderstanding, the scholar replied calmly. The high priest looked away, his gaze returned to the blade. That blade chose him. No, she said. It did not choose at all. The words felt heavy. Choice meant meaning. No choice meant chance. The high priest finally faced the human. Earthling, he said, you will explain everything. The human nodded. I'll try. They gathered around a long stone table etched with symbols of creation. The human stood on one side. The priests and elders stood on the other. No one sat. "Start with this," the high priest said. "Why you?" The human shrugged lightly. "It's not me, it's how I see things." "That is not an answer," the priest said. "It's the only one I have," the human replied. The scholar gestured toward the blade. "Explain how you knew what to do." "I didn't know," the human said. "I guessed." "Guessed," an elder repeated, shocked. "Yeah," the human said. "We guess a lot, we try. If it doesn't work, we try again." The high priest narrowed his eyes. "And when you fail, we learn," the human said. "Or we break something, then we learn more." The elders exchanged uneasy looks. The scholar leaned forward. "You said the blade was familiar." "It reminded me of stuff back home," the human said. "Old tools, things people forgot the reason for." He paused, then added, "Like a wrench used as a doorstop for 100 years. Some priests looked confused, others looked offended. "You treat sacred objects without respect," one priest said sharply. "I treat them with curiosity," the human replied. "That's respect too, just a different kind." The high priest lifted his staff slightly. "Then answer this. If the blade is only a tool, why did it not respond to anyone else?" The human walked closer to the table and traced a finger through the air, careful not to touch any sacred markings. "You trained them not to," he said. The room stilled. "What do you mean?" the priest asked. "You taught them to fear it," the human said. "Fear makes people stiff. Stiff hands grip wrong. Wrong grip makes lifting harder." The scholar nodded slowly. "And ritual? Ritual adds pressure," the human said. "Pressure makes mistakes." The high priest's crest lowered. "You suggest our traditions caused failure." "I think they prevented success," the human replied gently. Silence fell. An elder spoke at last. "Then the blade tests nothing." "It tests understanding," the human said, "not worth." The elders did not like that answer. One of them stepped forward. "If what you say is true, then anyone could lift it." "Probably," the human said. The room reacted strongly to that, shock, fear, anger. "That would destroy the calling," the high priest said. "Only if the calling was about control," the scholar replied. The high priest turned sharply. "You speak treason." She did not flinch. "I speak curiosity." The high priest took a slow breath. "Earthling," he said, "what would your people do with such a blade?" The human thought for a moment, put a sign next to it. "A sign?" the priest asked. "Yeah," the human said. "Something like 'handle with care, old design, still works.'" The elders stared at him. "No worship?" one asked. "No," the human said. "We might argue about who made it. Maybe sell copies. Someone would definitely try to improve it." The high priest felt a deep discomfort. "Improve it," he repeated. "Sure," the human said. "Add better grip, change the balance, make it easier for different hands." The scholar's eyes lit up. "You change sacred things." "We change everything," the human replied. "That's how we survive." That word again, survive. The high priest realized something then. This human did not see the universe as a place of destiny and gods. He saw it as a place of problems and solutions. That worldview was dangerous. "If we accept your words," the high priest said slowly, "then the blade was made by mortals." "Most likely," the human said. "And if mortals made it," the priest continued, "then mortals can understand it." "Yes." "And if they can understand it," the priest said, voice tight, "then the priesthood is no longer needed." The human hesitated. "Or it changes." The high priest did not answer. He turned away and spoke quietly with the elders. Their voices were low, sharp, fearful. The scholar watched them, her face thoughtful, troubled. The human waited. At last, the high priest turned back. His expression was firm, but his eyes were tired. "We cannot allow you to leave," he said. The guide stiffened. The scholar frowned. "On what grounds?" "On the grounds of stability," the high priest replied. The human raised his hands slightly. "I'm not trying to cause trouble." "I believe you," the priest said. "That makes this worse." The scholar stepped forward. "You would silence truth to protect belief." "I would protect the galaxy from collapse," the high priest said. The human looked at him. "Belief that breaks from truth doesn't protect anyone." The priest said nothing. "We will study you," an elder said. "Your methods, your thinking." The human nodded. "That's fine." "You will not touch the blade again," the high priest added. "Okay," the human said, "and you will not speak of this to others." The human paused. "I won't lie." The priest's crest twitched. "You will choose your words." "I always do," the human replied. The council dispersed slowly. The scholar lingered behind. "You don't realize what you've done," she said quietly. "I think I do," the human said. "No," she replied. "You showed us that gods were never needed." He smiled faintly. That idea scares people, she nodded. Especially those in charge. She looked at the blade one last time. Thank you. For what? He asked. For reminding us that history can be wrong, she said. As she left, the human stood alone in the great hall. The blade rested silently on its platform, unchanged, unmoving. But the temple no longer felt ancient. It felt fragile. Part 3 ended with a truth uncovered, a belief shaken, and a quiet understanding that the real test had only just begun. The human was moved to a quiet chamber near the inner ring of the temple. It was not a prison, but it was not freedom either. The walls were smooth and warm, glowing softly with lines of light that followed ancient patterns. There were no guards inside the room, only watchers behind unseen panels. The temple trusted tradition more than force. The human sat on a stone bench and waited. Time passed slowly. Outside the wide window, the dying star continued its slow collapse, sending weak light across the chamber. The human watched it, thinking about how stars ended not with drama but with patience. After a long while, the door opened. The scholar entered alone. "You should not be here," the human said calmly. "I know," she replied. "That is why I came quietly." She sat across from him, folding her hands together. For the first time since the calling, she looked unsure. "They are afraid," she said. "I figured," the human replied. "You changed everything without trying," she continued. "That makes you more dangerous than someone who planned it." The human smiled faintly. "On Earth, that happens a lot," she studied him. "They want to understand how you think." "That's not easy," he said. "Most humans don't understand each other either." The scholar almost laughed, then stopped herself. "The elders believe your ideas will spread." "They will," the human said simply. She nodded. "Yes. Because they make sense." Silence filled the room. "They are reviewing the archives," she said at last. "Old records, old designs, things that were ignored." "That's good," the human said. "It is terrifying," she replied, "because they are finding patterns, designs, evidence." "Evidence of what?" he asked. "That the makers were not gods," she said softly. "They were builders." The human leaned back slightly. "Welcome to the club," she looked at him closely. "Your people live without gods. We have stories," the human said. "Beliefs, arguments. But when something breaks, we don't pray to fix it, we open it." "That way of thinking frightens the priesthood," she said. "It should," he replied. "It means responsibility," she exhaled slowly. "That word does not sit well with power." A soft sound echoed through the chamber as the lights dimmed slightly. Somewhere deeper in the temple, ancient systems adjusted, responding to commands given for the first time in centuries. "They tested the blade," the scholar said. The human turned his head. "How?" "They allowed others to try lifting it," she said, "without ritual. And some succeeded," she said quietly. The human closed his eyes for a moment. "Yeah, the high priest nearly collapsed," she added. "Not from anger, from grief." "That makes sense," the human said. "When your whole life is built on one idea, losing it feels like losing yourself." The scholar nodded. "But not everyone is grieving." "Who is?" he asked. "The younger priests," she replied. "The engineers, the thinkers, they are excited." The human smiled. "That's usually how change starts." She leaned forward. "They want to speak with you not as a threat, as a teacher." "I'm not a teacher," he said. "You are to us," she replied. Before he could answer, the door opened again. This time the high priest entered. He moved slower than before, his posture less rigid, his crest lower. He looked older, though no time had passed. The scholar stood and stepped aside. "Earthling," the high priest said. "Priest," the human replied respectfully. They faced each other in silence. "I have reviewed the archives," the high priest said. "I have seen designs that match your descriptions, handles shaped for hands like yours, tools meant to be carried, not worshipped." The human said nothing. "For centuries," the priest continued, "we believed the makers tested our worth. That failure was proof of humility." "And now?" the human asked. "And now," the priest said, "we see that failure was misunderstanding." The word tasted bitter. The high priest turned his gaze to the window. "We built an empire on ritual because we did not understand function." "That happens," the human said gently. The priest looked back at him. "Why does your kind think this way?" The human thought for a long moment. "Because we break things," he said. "A lot," the priest frowned. "We live on a rough world," the human continued. "Storms, quakes, fires, stuff fails. If we don't fix it, we don't last." "And faith?" the priest asked. "Faith helps people feel better," the human said. "Fixing helps them live." The high priest absorbed that in silence. "You did not come here to challenge us," he said finally. "No," the human replied. "I came to watch." "And yet," the priest said, "you showed us the truth." The scholar spoke softly. "Truth does not ask permission." The high priest nodded once. "No, it does not." He turned back to the human. "What would you do now?" "Me," the human asked. "I'd go home." "That is not possible," the priest said. "Not yet." The human waited. "The galaxy is watching us," the high priest said. "Whispers are already spreading. If we fall apart, others will follow." "So adapt," the human said. The priest closed his eyes. "We do not know how." "You learn," the human replied. "Same as us." The high priest studied him. "You would help us?" "I can explain how I think," the human said. "That's all." The priest considered this. "Then you will speak to the council." The scholar's eyes widened. "All of them?" "All," the priest confirmed. The chamber lights brightened slightly as the decision settled. Later, in a wide hall smaller than the calling chamber, but no less important, the human stood before the council. Elders, priests, scholars, and engineers filled the space. There was no blade present. The human spoke simply. He spoke of balance and leverage, of tools designed for tired hands, of mistakes that taught better ways, of humans selling old things at yard sales, not knowing their value until someone else found use in them. "Why would you sell something valuable?" an elder asked. "Because value changes," the human replied. "What one person doesn't need, another does," the room murmured. He spoke of survival, not glory, of progress built on small fixes, not miracles, of learning through failure. Some listened with anger, some with fear, many with relief. By the end, the silence was different, not shocked, thoughtful. The high priest rose. "We were never chosen," he said to the council. "We were simply unchallenged." No one argued. That night the blade was moved. Not hidden, displayed openly with notes, diagrams, and explanations beside it. For the first time in history, it was not worshipped. It was studied. The human watched from a distance as young engineers discussed improvements, as priests debated new teachings, as scholars rewrote old records, not erasing faith but reshaping it. The temple no longer felt fragile. It felt alive. Part 4 ended with an empire learning that understanding was stronger than belief, and that humanity's quiet strength was not power but clarity. The day the human was allowed to leave the inner ring, the temple felt different. It was quieter, but not from fear. It was the quiet of people thinking. Priests walked the halls without chanting. Scholars carried tablets filled with new notes instead of old prayers. Engineers moved freely between chambers once considered sacred. No one stopped them. No one told them not to touch. The blade was no longer alone. It rested behind clear shielding, not to protect it from harm, but to protect people from confusing it with something it was not. Around it were drawings, measurements, and translated notes explaining how it worked, why it was built, and what problem it once solved. Visitors stood before it, not kneeling but talking. The high priest watched from the upper walkway. His robes were still white and silver, but the symbols had changed. Old marks of destiny had been replaced with new ones representing learning and responsibility. He felt lighter than he had in centuries. The human stood beside the scholar near the exit hall, preparing to leave. "They will remember you," she said. "I hope they remember the idea," the human replied. "Not me," she smiled softly. "That may be impossible." Across the hall, a group of young priests tested another ancient object. It had once been called a divine lock. Now it was simply a mechanism. It opened easily when understood. The high priest approached. "You are free to go," he said. The human nodded. "Thanks." The priest hesitated, then added, "The council wishes to name this change after you." The human winced. "Please don't." The priest tilted his head. "Why?" "Because it's not about me," the human said. "It's about letting go." The priest considered that, then he nodded. "Very well." They stood in silence for a moment. "You were right," the high priest said. "Gods were never needed." The human shrugged. "People usually are." The priest looked toward the blade one last time. "What will your people say about this?" The human smiled. "Depends who I tell." The scholar laughed quietly. A transport ship waited at the outer dock. It was small, plain, and covered in marks from long use. The human stepped aboard without ceremony. As the ship pulled away, the dying star sent one last weak flare across the temple windows. Inside, no one bowed, no one prayed, they watched. News spread quickly across the galaxy, not of a human lifting a sacred blade, but of a priesthood admitting it had been wrong. That shook empires far more than any weapon. Some worlds reacted with anger, others with fear, a few with hope. Human representatives were invited to councils that had never allowed outsiders before. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, as problem solvers, they did not bring miracles, they brought questions. On one distant world, an ancient machine was repaired after centuries of worship. On another, a holy barrier was discovered to be a safety shield long overdue for maintenance. Each revelation hurt at first, then helped. Back on Earth, the human returned to a quiet life. He went back to fixing things, old engines, broken panels, forgotten machines. One weekend, he visited a local yard sale. Tables were covered in random objects. Old tools, bent metal, things no one wanted anymore. He picked up a strange handle, worn smooth by time. It felt familiar. The seller shrugged. $5. The human smiled and paid. Far away in the temple that once feared truth, a new plaque was placed beside the blade. It did not mention gods. It read, "Built by hands, used with care, understood through learning." Children visited the hall and asked questions. Priests answered honestly. Scholars encouraged doubt. Engineers taught balance and design. Faith did not vanish, it changed. It became trust in effort, not destiny. The high priest stood before the council one final time. "We were never abandoned by gods," he said. "We were waiting to grow up." No one argued. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. It did not need to. It fixed what others worshipped, and that was enough.